I was 49 when my daughter told me to go home from my grandson's wedding, and the words she used were so childish that for a second I thought I had misunderstood her. She leaned close enough for me to smell champagne on her breath, smiled the way she smiled for clients when she wanted to look calm, and said, "Go home, Pity Daddy. Nobody needs another scene from the poor old man tonight." Then she straightened my jacket as if she were helping me, turned toward the photographer, and left me standing beside the service entrance while 200 people waited for the first dance. My name is Martin Reed. My daughter is Kayla, my grandson is Owen, and the wedding was supposed to be the happiest day of his life. I had spent 18 years trying to make sure Owen never felt like the circumstances of his birth were a debt he had to repay. Because Kayla had him when she was 15, I had been 16 when Kayla was born, and too many people in our family treated early parenthood like a curse that moved from one generation to the next. I didn't want Owen to grow up believing he was proof that we had all failed. I wanted him to believe he was a person who arrived before the adults around him were ready and was still loved without conditions. I was not a wealthy man, but I was not helpless either. I owned a small flooring and renovation company with 6 employees, 2 vans, a cramped office, and a warehouse that smelled like sawdust no matter how often we cleaned it. I had started the company after years of working under other contractors, and by the time I was 45, it paid my mortgage, covered health insurance, and allowed me to help Kayla when her real estate commissions arrived late, which happened often enough that temporary had become a category in my budget. Kayla's mother, Diane, died from a stroke when Owen was 9. Before that, Diane and I had spent most of our adult lives acting as the stable floor under Kayla's changing plans. We watched Owen while she finished school, paid for her licensing classes, helped with rent when his biological father disappeared, and took him to every practice and medical appointment she could not attend. Kayla loved him, but she was young, frightened, and always convinced that one more opportunity would finally make her life look different from ours. Diane understood that hunger better than I did. I saw danger in it. Diane saw a girl trying to escape the shame other people had put on her. After Diane died, Owen and I became even closer because grief created a routine neither of us had asked for. He came to my house after school, helped sand cabinet doors in the garage, learned how to read a tape measure before he learned how to drive, and sat with me through evenings when the silence in the kitchen felt too large. Kayla began building a successful career selling expensive houses and managing her own online image, while Owen spent enough time with me that people occasionally assumed he was my son. I never corrected them quickly, although I also never tried to replace Kayla. She was his mother. I was simply the adult who stayed predictable. When Owen was 17, he began dating Jenna Morales, a quiet girl from his trade program who wanted to become a dental hygienist and worked weekends at her aunt's bakery. They were young, serious, and more practical than I had been at their age. A few months after Owen turned 18, Jenna became pregnant. They told me first because they were afraid Kayla would turn the pregnancy into a crisis, and their fear proved accurate. Kayla cried, shouted, demanded that Jenna consider every option, blamed Owen for repeating the family pattern, then changed direction within 48 hours and began planning a wedding large enough to make the pregnancy look like part of an elegant story rather than a difficult fact. Owen and Jenna wanted a courthouse ceremony, dinner with close relatives, and an apartment they could actually afford. Kayla said a courthouse wedding would follow them forever, make Jenna's family look ashamed, and damage Owen's future because people remembered how a family presented itself. She had recently started working with luxury developers and wanted to move from ordinary residential sales into high-end property marketing, so a polished wedding also gave her content, contacts, and a room full of people she wanted to impress. At first, I stayed out of the argument. I told Owen that a marriage mattered more than the party, and that he should not begin adult life carrying debt for flowers and photographs. Kayla accused me of trying to keep him small because I had never understood ambition. She said I always treated caution like wisdom when it was really fear, and because I had heard versions of that accusation since she was a teenager, I felt the familiar pressure to prove I was supportive rather than controlling. The venue she chose was a converted brick mill outside Dayton, beautiful but expensive, with a ballroom, courtyard, catering kitchen, and enough empty industrial charm that every decorative choice cost extra. Kayla negotiated a discount by promising the owner exposure through her real estate network, then called me one evening and said she needed a temporary bridge payment of $12,000 to hold the date and secure vendors before a commission check cleared. She promised I would have the money back within 30 days. I transferred it because Owen sounded miserable whenever the wedding became an argument, because Jenna's parents could only contribute a few $1,000s, and because Kayla knew exactly which part of me still believed money could prevent conflict if I offered it early enough. 30 days passed, then 60. Kayla paid back $2,000 and said the rest was delayed because a closing had moved. She asked for another $5,000 to cover the photographer and catering deposit, and when I hesitated, she said Owen already felt I was embarrassed by him. That was not true, but it was an effective thing to say because my entire relationship with Owen had been built around making sure he never felt like a burden. By the time the invitations went out, I had contributed $24,300. I told myself most of it was a loan. Kayla continued calling it help. Owen believed she had paid nearly everything herself because she told him my contribution covered only the rehearsal dinner and one small vendor deposit. I didn't correct him because I did not want him standing between us, and I was still stupid enough to believe silence was protecting his wedding rather than protecting her lie. The first warning from the bank came 6 weeks before the ceremony. A representative called to confirm a draw from my home equity line for $18,000. I had not requested it. I assumed there had been a clerical error, but the electronic form carried my name, the last 4 digits of my Social Security number, and a signature that looked enough like mine to pass a quick review. The money had gone into a joint account I had once shared with Kayla for emergency household expenses after Diane died. An account I had forgotten remained open because the balance had been almost zero for years. I froze the account and drove to the bank. The manager showed me the digital request, the device information, and the verification questions. Whoever submitted it knew the street where I grew up, the name of my first employer, and the approximate balance of my mortgage. Kayla knew all of that. I still did not accuse her in the bank because parents can build impossible explanations when the alternative is admitting their child stole from them. I called Kayla and asked whether she knew anything about the draw. Paul was her husband of 7 years, a man who sold commercial insurance, wore expensive watches on credit, and treated every financial problem like a temporary misunderstanding that another deal would solve. Kayla said they intended to repay the money after 2 closings, and that she had assumed I would agree because the wedding was already in motion. I asked why she had used my signature. She said I was being dramatic about paperwork inside a family. That sentence changed the conversation. I told her the line was frozen, the bank was investigating, and no more money would leave my accounts. She accused me of humiliating her in front of vendors, said canceling contracts would destroy Owen's wedding, and ended the call by telling me I always found a way to make important moments about my fear. I did not cancel anything that day. I called an attorney named Rachel Kim who had handled a contract dispute for my company, and she told me to stop discussing money by phone, preserve every document, change passwords, and avoid confronting Kayla until we understood whether the unauthorized loan was an isolated act or part of something larger. Rachel also told me that love did not turn a forged signature into a misunderstanding, which sounded obvious when she said it, and almost cruel when I applied it to my own daughter. The larger picture appeared through an old tablet Kayla had left at my house after using it to edit the wedding seating chart. I charged it because I intended to return it, and when the screen opened, a message notification appeared from Paul. The preview said, "If Pity Daddy starts asking about the house again, keep him away from the bar and let people see him upset." I should have stopped reading. Instead, I opened the thread, and the last 2 years of my relationship with my daughter rearranged themselves in front of me. Kayla and Paul had been calling me Pity Daddy for months. The name began after I refused to buy into one of Paul's business ideas and said I could not afford to risk retirement savings. Kayla wrote that I enjoyed looking tired because it made people feel sorry for me. Paul joked that I had built my whole personality around being the man who sacrificed. They complained about my clothes, my truck, the way I asked for receipts, and the fact that Owen trusted me more than he trusted Paul. The messages about the wedding were worse because they were practical. They discussed the unauthorized home equity draw, the tax debt they had concealed, Paul's sports betting losses, and a past due business loan secured against Kayla's future commissions. Less than half of the $18,000 had gone toward the wedding. The rest had covered a tax payment, 2 credit cards, and a transfer to Paul's betting account that he described as money needed to recover losses before Kayla noticed. Kayla had noticed. She was furious, but not because he used my money. She was furious because he lost again. Another thread described what they planned to do after the wedding. Kayla wanted me to sign documents placing my house into a family trust, supposedly so it would avoid probate and eventually pass smoothly to her and Owen. Paul had found an online service that allowed him to become trustee. Once the house entered the trust, they planned to refinance it, clear their debts, and move me into the small apartment above my warehouse, which they described as more practical for a single man who spent most days at work. They knew I would refuse if they explained the real terms. They planned to present the documents during a family dinner when Owen and Jenna were present, tell me the trust protected the baby's future, and make any hesitation look selfish. The messages also showed how they were preparing for my reaction. Kayla had told relatives that I drank more after Diane died, even though I rarely had more than 1 beer. She had described me as forgetful because I once left my keys at a restaurant. She had saved a voice message where I raised my voice after learning Paul had driven my work van without permission. She wrote that if I challenged the wedding money publicly, she would tell people grief and loneliness had made me unstable. Paul suggested provoking me at the reception, recording whatever happened, and using the video later if I resisted the trust. Kayla replied that security could remove me if necessary, and that Owen would eventually understand she was protecting everyone. The phrase, "Go home, pity daddy," appeared 3 times as a joke about how she would handle me if I asked questions. I copied every message, photographed the tablet, and delivered it to Rachel. We informed the bank, secured my business accounts, revoked Kayla's access to the old joint account, and prepared a written notice stating that I would not sign any trust, loan, property, or power of attorney document without independent legal review. Rachel wanted me to consider reporting the forged draw immediately. I asked for a week because the wedding was close, and because I could not separate protecting Owen from protecting Kayla even after I knew she had used that confusion against me. I did tell Owen part of the truth. I asked him to meet me at the warehouse after work and explained that I had paid more toward the wedding than he knew, that there was a dispute over money, and that he should not sign anything related to loans, trusts, or family property. He became angry because he thought I was attacking his mother 6 days before his wedding. Kayla had told him I regretted helping and wanted to embarrass her over money. I showed him the bank statement proving my payments, but I did not show him the messages about custody, instability, or the house because I watched his face and understood he was already carrying a pregnant fiancée, a new job, and a wedding built by adults who had turned every decision into a loyalty test. I gave him a sealed envelope containing copies of the most important records and told him to open it only if something happened at the wedding that made him doubt what he was being told. He shoved the envelope into his backpack and said he did not want family evidence as a wedding gift. I told him neither did I. The rehearsal dinner took place in the back room of a restaurant Kayla used for client events. My name was absent from the printed program, even though Jenna's parents, Paul's parents, and several relatives had listed roles. Kayla explained that space was limited. She seated me beside 2 contractors who had installed the venue lighting and introduced me to guests as the grandfather who had helped in his own way, a phrase that made my contribution sound like I had carried chairs. I watched her move through the room in a cream dress, collecting compliments and directing photographs, and I felt something colder than anger. She was not simply ashamed of me. She needed the room to believe she had created everything alone. After dinner, Paul approached me near the parking lot and said the bank problem could still be fixed quietly if I stopped involving lawyers. He claimed the signature was a family shortcut, promised repayment after the wedding, and warned that a fraud investigation would destroy Kayla's career. I told him Kayla's career had survived because I had repeatedly paid for emergencies she hid from clients, and I would no longer finance the appearance of stability. He stepped close enough that I could smell whiskey and said Owen would choose the parent who built his future, not the grandfather who kept receipts. I looked at him and realized he believed Kayla's public image had become a form of ownership over the family. He thought if enough people admired her, facts would become rude interruptions. On the morning of the wedding, I put on a dark gray suit Diane had chosen for our 20th anniversary. It was not fashionable, but it fit, and the inside pocket still held a small note she had once written before a business dinner, telling me to stop pulling at the sleeves because nobody was studying me as closely as I imagined. I carried that note with me because I needed one voice from my old life that was not trying to manage what everyone else believed. The ceremony itself was beautiful. Owen looked terrified until Jenna reached him. Then his face settled. They exchanged simple vows, and when he promised to build a home where neither of them had to earn the right to feel safe, I had to look down because the sentence sounded like something he had learned from surviving all of us. Kayla had placed me in the third row, behind Paul's parents and several clients. I did not argue. During family photographs, the photographer took pictures of Kayla, Paul, Owen, Jenna, and Jenna's parents, then began packing equipment while I stood 10 feet away. Jenna noticed and called me over. Kayla interrupted, saying the schedule was already late, but Jenna insisted. The photographer took one picture of me with the couple, while Kayla watched with the expression she used when a seller rejected her advice. At the reception, my place card sat at a table near the kitchen with vendors and distant cousins. Owen had expected me at the family table and asked Kayla why I had been moved. She told him I requested a quiet seat because crowds made me emotional. I heard this from Jenna's aunt, who asked whether I needed medication. I considered leaving before dinner, but I stayed because Diane would have stayed for Owen. The memorial table near the ballroom entrance displayed photographs of deceased relatives. Diane's picture was missing. I had given Kayla a framed photograph weeks earlier, one of Diane holding Owen at his 5th birthday, and Kayla had promised to include it. When I asked the coordinator, she said Kayla removed the frame that morning because it did not match the gold color scheme. That small decision broke through more restraint than the seating, the money, or the photographs. I found Kayla near the bar and asked her why her mother's picture had been removed. I kept my voice low. She glanced at the people around us, smiled too quickly, and said this was not the time. I told her there would never be a better time to explain why matching frames mattered more than the woman who helped raise the groom. Kayla's smile disappeared. She said Diane had been dead for 9 years and the wedding was not a memorial service. I asked whether she had removed the photograph because it reminded people who actually raised Owen during the years she was building her career. That question was sharper than it needed to be, but it was true, and truth spoken from anger can still become a weapon. Kayla looked toward the photographer, noticed several guests watching, and made the decision she had already rehearsed in messages. She stepped closer, straightened my jacket, and said, "Go home, pity daddy. Nobody needs another scene from the poor old man tonight." I asked her to repeat it. She did, louder. Then she told security I had been drinking, bothering guests, and refusing to leave her alone. I had consumed 1 glass of water and half a cup of coffee. The security supervisor looked embarrassed, but asked me to step outside while they clarified the situation. Kayla turned away before I moved, already certain the room would accept her version because she had delivered it calmly. The mistake she made was not insulting me in public. She had done worse in private. Her mistake was assuming Owen had left the envelope unopened. He had opened it that morning after Jenna told him Kayla tried to make her sign a vendor reimbursement form that would have placed several wedding charges in Owen's name. He read the bank records, the messages about my house, the plan to provoke me, and the lines where his mother described him as emotional leverage. He said nothing before the ceremony because Jenna asked him not to turn their vows into a confrontation, but he kept the copies in the inside pocket of his jacket. When he saw security walking me toward the side entrance, he left the dance floor and followed. Kayla tried to stop him, saying I was having another episode. Owen asked her what episode she meant and whether she wanted to explain the forged loan before or after the first dance. The people closest to them became silent. Kayla told him I had filled his head with lies. Owen removed the folded bank documents from his pocket and asked why my home equity had paid her taxes and Paul's betting account. Paul moved toward him and said they should discuss it privately. Owen said privacy was the only reason the plan had lasted. The DJ lowered the music without being asked. Guests began raising phones, which I hated, but by then, the event Kayla had designed for public admiration had become public for a different reason. I told Owen we could leave and handle everything later. He refused. He had spent years watching adults postpone truth in the name of protecting him, and he said he was done being the reason everyone lied politely. Kayla grabbed the microphone from the DJ table. She told the room that I was sick with grief, obsessed with controlling her, and angry because she had succeeded without becoming dependent on me. She said I had offered money voluntarily, then turned it into a weapon when I did not receive enough attention. Some people believed her for several minutes because she spoke with confidence and because public confidence often sounds more credible than private records. Owen asked the venue coordinator to display the payment summary Kayla had sent the week before. The coordinator hesitated, but Jenna's father, Miguel, told her the couple had a right to see charges listed in their names. The summary showed $31,000 attributed to Owen and Jenna, even though they had never agreed to those expenses. It also listed my contribution as $3,000. I opened the banking app on my phone and showed Owen the transfers totaling $24,300 plus the unauthorized $18,000 draw. He held the screen toward the nearest guess, not as a dramatic performance, but because his hands were shaking and he seemed to need physical proof that the world was not shifting under him. Paul reached for my phone. I pulled it back. He told me to stop destroying Kayla's life over money and said he would repay everything if I signed a statement confirming the loan had been authorized. I told him the bank already had the digital records and the tablet messages. When he heard the word messages, his face changed. Kayla asked what messages. That question exposed another crack. She knew I had seen the conversation about my house and the wedding, but she did not know Paul had maintained separate threads with his betting friends and with Kayla's assistant, Brianna. Rachel's investigator had found hotel charges and messages showing Paul had been sleeping with Brianna for almost a year. He had used part of the home equity money to pay for their rooms and had promised Brianna he would leave Kayla after the wedding, once Kayla's commissions cleared their debts. I had not planned to reveal that at the reception. I considered it evidence for the financial case, not entertainment for guests. Paul assumed I was about to expose him and lunged for the folder Owen held. Owen stepped back. Paul caught his jacket and Jenna screamed. I moved between them, telling Paul to let go, and he shoved me hard enough that I struck the edge of a table. A tray of champagne glasses fell. Security rushed forward, but Paul swung at Owen before they reached us. The punch caught Owen near the cheekbone. Owen tackled him. They crashed into the lower part of the cake display, and the expensive 3-tier cake Kayla had spent weeks photographing slid sideways, struck the floor, and broke across Paul's suit and the ballroom rug. That is the image people shared afterward, not my daughter humiliating me or my grandson learning his mother had used his wedding to hide debt, but Paul on the floor with white frosting across his shoulder while 2 security guards pulled Owen away. It looked almost comic without the sound, but there was nothing funny in the room. Kayla slapped me. She did it once, open-handed, while shouting that I had planned everything. Then she reached for Owen, and Jenna stepped between them. Kayla pushed Jenna's shoulder. Miguel moved his daughter back, and several relatives began shouting at once. Police arrived because the venue automatically called them after the fight. They separated everyone, took statements, reviewed phone videos, and spoke with security. Paul claimed Owen attacked him without warning. 3 recordings showed Paul grabbing the documents and striking first. He was cited for assault and removed from the property. Owen was not arrested, although an officer warned him that tackling Paul after the punch could still have caused serious injury. The reception ended less than an hour after dinner. Some guests stayed to help clean. Others left without speaking to anyone. Kayla disappeared with one of her friends before the police finished, and Paul spent the night at his brother's house because Kayla locked him out of theirs. Owen and Jenna did not get a first dance. They returned to their apartment, ate sandwiches in wedding clothes, and turned off their phones. The next morning they drove to my house. Jenna placed the one surviving small layer of cake on my kitchen table and said they wanted one normal moment from the weekend. We ate it with coffee. I apologized for not telling Owen everything sooner. He apologized for doubting me. Neither apology fixed the fact that Kayla had used the wedding as a stage, and the rest of us had helped build it by refusing to challenge her before guests arrived. The bank investigation moved quickly because the electronic request had come from Kayla's home internet connection and used a verification code sent to the old joint account email she still controlled. She first claimed I had approved the draw verbally, then said Paul submitted it without her knowledge, but the tablet messages showed her discussing the amount before and after the transfer. Paul tried to protect himself by giving the bank and police screenshots showing Kayla had supplied my personal information. Kayla responded by giving her attorney proof that Paul moved part of the money into betting accounts and paid Brianna's hotel bills. Their marriage did not survive the first month after the wedding. Brianna contacted Kayla when Paul stopped answering. She provided messages, photographs, and receipts because she had believed he was already separated. Kayla confronted Paul in the parking lot outside his office, scratched the side of his car with a key, and threw his phone into traffic after finding another woman's messages. A passerby recorded the confrontation. Paul obtained a temporary protection order, which would have sounded absurd to anyone who saw him shove me and punch Owen, but the law addressed each act separately. And Kayla's anger did not become lawful because he had betrayed her. Her real estate brokerage suspended her after clients complained about the wedding videos and after the bank notified her that an identity fraud investigation involved her. She told people I had destroyed her career by taking a private family problem public. I reminded her that she had instructed security to remove me in front of guests, then taken a microphone and described me as unstable. The public part had been her decision. The evidence was simply less flattering than the story she planned to tell. The prosecutor did not send her to prison. Real life rarely arranges consequences with the speed people expect. She accepted a plea connected to unauthorized use of financial information, agreed to restitution, received probation, and completed financial ethics counseling that she mocked until the court warned her that missing another session could violate the agreement. Paul faced separate penalties for assault and financial activity, paid a fine, completed anger management, and entered a repayment settlement after the bank pursued both of them. I recovered part of the $18,000 from the frozen account. The rest became a restitution balance that Kayla and Paul owed jointly. I also recovered some of the wedding money through vendor refunds, although the venue kept most deposits because the services had been provided or reserved. The more important protection involved my house. Rachel recorded a new deed notice, updated my estate plan, closed the old joint account, and created a trust managed by an independent professional rather than family. The house would eventually benefit Owen and any future children, but nobody could borrow against it while I was alive, or move me without my own decision. When Kayla learned I had removed her from control of the estate, she said I was punishing her forever for one bad period. I told her a bad period was missing payments or lying about a commission, forging a loan, planning to take my house, provoking me for evidence, and humiliating me in public required repeated choices. She cried and said Diane would have forgiven her. That was the cruelest thing she said after the wedding because she used her dead mother as a witness who could not disagree. I told her Diane might have forgiven her eventually, but Diane would also have protected me, Owen, and the home we built. Forgiveness was not the same as returning access. Owen and Jenna remained married. Their daughter Rose was born 7 months later, healthy and loud, with a full head of dark hair. They rented a small apartment near Jenna's parents and refused every offer Kayla made to arrange something more impressive. Owen worked for an electrical contractor instead of joining my company immediately because he wanted to know he could support his family without stepping into another arrangement shaped by obligation. I respected that decision, although I helped with childcare and bought a used crib after Jenna found one that met current safety standards. I did not put my name on their lease, demand a say in parenting, or present help as proof that they owed me loyalty. After everything that happened, I became careful about the difference between support and ownership. Kayla did not meet Rose for 3 months. Owen set conditions. No unannounced visits, no photographs online, no criticism of Jenna, and no discussing the wedding around the baby. Kayla called the rules humiliating. Owen said humiliation was being removed from your own reception while people watched. She eventually agreed. The first visit lasted 20 minutes. Kayla held Rose, cried quietly, and did not take out her phone. I watched from the kitchen and felt no satisfaction. My daughter looked smaller without the audience she had spent years building, but she was still my daughter. And love does not disappear simply because trust does. It becomes heavier, more limited, and less comforting. Paul and Kayla finalized their divorce the following year. He lost his insurance job after a compliance review found he had failed to disclose gambling debts connected to client entertainment accounts. He moved in with his brother, stopped paying restitution for 2 months, and returned to court after wage withholding began. Brianna refused to continue seeing him once she learned how much of their relationship had been financed through stolen money. Kayla rebuilt part of her career at a smaller brokerage. She stopped presenting herself as a luxury family expert and focused on ordinary rentals and first-time buyers. Some people in town continued calling her the wedding woman because the cake video circulated longer than any professional advertisement she had produced. She hated the name, but I never repeated it. Public shame had already done enough damage, and I did not need to turn her humiliation into my hobby. About 18 months after the wedding, Kayla asked to meet me at a diner. She arrived without makeup, ordered coffee, and placed an envelope on the table containing a cashier's check for part of what she owed. She said she had spent years believing that because I helped willingly, I did not feel the cost. She thought my reliability meant I would always recover, and that her emergencies mattered more because they threatened the life she was trying to build. I told her that was close to the truth, but still too gentle. She had not merely assumed I would recover. She had decided my ability to survive made it acceptable to hurt me. She nodded. Then she apologized without mentioning her childhood, Diane, Paul, stress, alcohol, or the pressure of the wedding. She said she stole from me, lied to Owen, tried to use my house, and humiliated me because she believed controlling the room mattered more than telling the truth. It was the first apology I believed. I did not restore her access to my finances or estate. I did not invite her back into my company. I did agree to meet for coffee once a month, and over time those meetings became less formal. We talked about Rose, work, and Diane. Sometimes Kayla asked questions about the bank case, and I answered only when the purpose was understanding rather than arguing. There was another person at the wedding whose presence made the seating arrangement even harder to dismiss as an oversight. Owen's biological father, Trevor Lane, sat in the first row beside Kayla and Paul. Trevor had not attended a birthday, school conference, or medical appointment since Owen was 6. He had sent irregular child support when the state forced him, disappeared whenever Kayla asked for anything that required time, and built a series of new families in nearby counties without ever explaining to Owen why distance of less than an hour had become impossible to cross. Owen had spoken to him twice during the previous 5 years. Both calls ended with Trevor promising to visit and then canceling. Kayla usually called him useless, but 3 months before the wedding she suddenly began saying people changed and that a young man deserved his father at an important moment. Owen was uncomfortable. Jenna distrusted the timing, and I stayed quiet because I did not want my anger toward Trevor to make the decision for them. What I did not know was that Kayla had offered Trevor $2,000, a hotel room, and professional photographs if he attended, wore the suit she selected, and allowed her to present the reunion online as proof that she had healed an old family wound. She also asked him to say that I had discouraged contact over the years because I wanted Owen to depend on me. Trevor agreed because he needed money after losing a delivery job and because shame becomes easier to manage when someone offers you a version where another person caused it. The tablet contained those messages too. Kayla sent Trevor a short list of phrases for interviews with the wedding videographer. He was supposed to say he had always loved Owen, had finally been welcomed back by Kayla, and hoped the wedding marked the start of a new chapter. One message said, "Martin will hate seeing you in the family photos, but let him sulk. It helps the story." I did not tell Owen before the ceremony, because learning his mother had purchased a performance from the father who abandoned him felt even crueler than learning about the money. I told Rachel, and she advised me to keep the messages because the false claims about past contact could matter if Kayla later tried to portray me as controlling. Then I watched Trevor sit in the first row, while the grandson I had raised looked at him with cautious hope. Trevor lasted through the ceremony and most of dinner. He posed with Owen, accepted congratulations from strangers, and told one of Jenna's uncles that work travel had kept him away for years. He avoided my eyes. When the fight began, he did not defend Kayla or Paul. He moved toward the exit, but an officer stopped him as a witness because he had been standing near the cake. 2 days later, Trevor called me. Kayla had paid only $500 and told him the rest was canceled because the reception had been ruined. He was angry enough to become honest. He sent me the messages, the payment promise, and a voice recording where Kayla coached him to say I had blocked contact. He also admitted that I had never once prevented him from seeing Owen. The only time I had threatened legal action was after Trevor arrived drunk when Owen was 8, and even then I told him he could return sober with advance notice. I asked why he agreed to lie. He said he needed the money and wanted one day where people looked at him like a father. That answer did not make me forgive him, but it was more honest than anything Kayla had said during the first weeks after the wedding. I forwarded the material to Rachel and told Trevor the decision about future contact belonged to Owen. Trevor asked me to speak for him. I refused. I had spent too many years carrying messages between people who wanted the benefits of relationships without the risk of speaking directly. Owen listened to the recording in my kitchen. He did not cry or shout. He removed the framed wedding photograph that included Trevor and placed it face down on the table. Then he asked me whether everyone at the wedding had been assigned a part except him and Jenna. I told him that was how it looked. He said his mother had turned his marriage into a launch event, his biological father into a redemption story, Paul into the successful provider, and me into the unstable relative who could be removed when the story needed conflict. He asked what role she had given him. I said she had made him the reason nobody was allowed to question her. That was the moment Owen stopped defending her choices as stress. He still loved her, but he no longer treated love as evidence that her intentions had been good. The wedding vendors added another layer because several had not received the full amounts Kayla claimed to have paid. The florist was owed $4,000. The rental company had a balance on chairs and linens, and the videographer had accepted a reduced fee in exchange for promotion through Kayla's accounts. Kayla had collected money from me, Jenna's parents, and 2 relatives who believed they were paying specific invoices, then moved the funds through her business account and paid whichever vendor threatened to cancel first. She had also charged Owen and Jenna for services they never requested, including a second photographer, a champagne wall, custom signs, and a luxury car that carried Kayla and Paul to the venue. The young couple believed those features were gifts. After the wedding, invoices arrived in their apartment because Kayla had entered Owen's email address and listed him as the responsible client on final balances. Miguel helped Owen dispute the charges, while Rachel sent notices showing that he had not signed the contracts. Some vendors apologized and redirected claims toward Kayla. Others said they had relied on her representation that she managed the couple's finances. The process lasted months, and every envelope forced Owen and Jenna to revisit a party they had never wanted. Jenna became angry in a quieter way than Owen. She made a spreadsheet of every promise, payment, signature, and message, then spent evenings calling vendors while pregnant and working at the bakery. Kayla later accused her of turning Owen against his mother, but the truth was that Jenna had become the first person in his life who treated confusion as a problem to solve rather than a condition he had to tolerate. Kayla tried several approaches to regain control. First, she apologized for the microphone, but not the theft, saying alcohol and grief had made her cruel. Then she claimed Paul had manipulated her. When Owen asked why she had written the messages calling me pity daddy before Paul responded, she said couples sometimes adopt each other's language. When that failed, she sent relatives long explanations about the pressure of raising Owen young and the resentment she felt watching me receive praise for helping with a child she had carried and delivered. There was truth inside that resentment. People often thanked me for raising Owen while treating Kayla like a cautionary story. I had sometimes accepted praise without correcting the implication that she had done nothing. Diane had challenged me about that when she was alive, telling me that helping Kayla did not entitle us to erase the years when she worked, studied, and tried to become stable. I admitted this to Kayla during one of our first meetings with a family therapist. I told her I could understand why she hated being compared with me and why Owen's closeness to me sometimes felt like judgment. I apologized for moments when I had used my help to end arguments instead of listening. Then I told her none of that explained the loan, the house plan, the coach lies, or the security guards. The therapist asked Kayla whether she could hold two facts at once: that she had been wounded by the family story and that she had deliberately wounded other people. Kayla said everyone wanted nuance for me and accountability for her. The therapist replied that accountability was not the absence of nuance. Kayla left the session early. My own anger became difficult after the immediate crisis passed. During the bank investigation, I had tasks, documents, calls, and deadlines. When those slowed, I began waking before dawn with arguments already running in my head. I imagined speeches I should have made at the wedding, ways I could have exposed Kayla before she spoke, and answers that would have made the guests understand immediately. Rachel warned me that rehearsing public revenge could become another way the wedding controlled my life. She was right, but knowing that did not stop it. I had spent decades swallowing anger because I believed restraint made me better than the people who created emergencies. After the reception, every old resentment returned with permission. I started therapy with a man named Dr. Patel, who asked why being called pitiful hurt more than being called controlling or unstable. I said because pity turned every sacrifice into a performance. It suggested I had cared for Owen, supported Kayla, and kept working after Diane died only because I wanted an audience. He asked whether I had sometimes wanted people to notice. I said of course I had. Being needed and being appreciated are not the same thing, and I had often received the first while pretending I did not want the second. That admission helped more than pretending I was completely selfless. Kayla had used a real weakness, but using a weakness did not make her story true. I could want recognition and still have paid bills because people needed help. I could feel proud of raising Owen and still respect Kayla as his mother. Human motives did not become fraud simply because they were mixed. Eddie, my longest-serving installer, waited until the others left and told me Paul had visited the office twice during the previous month, asking questions about the apartment above the warehouse and whether I planned to retire. Eddie assumed Paul was helping with estate planning. After learning about the messages, I understood Paul had been checking whether the apartment could be made livable before they moved me there. The apartment was not a home. It had one bedroom, a small shower, and windows facing the loading area. We used it for visiting subcontractors and late-night emergencies. Kayla had walked through it once and complained about the smell. The idea that she planned to place me there while borrowing against my house showed how completely she had converted my life into numbers on a page. I changed the locks at the office and installed separate approvals for transfers, not because my employees were untrustworthy, but because I had learned that informal access becomes dangerous when everyone assumes family members need no explanation. I also removed Kayla as my emergency contact. That small form hurt more than changing the deed notice. For years, if I collapsed at work, she was the person someone would call. After the wedding, I listed Owen and Rachel. Kayla found out when the company insurance renewed and accused me of replacing her with her son. I said I had selected people who would protect my instructions instead of using an emergency to gain control. She told me I sounded paranoid. I told her paranoia was fear without evidence. I had screenshots. The criminal and civil cases required me to describe our family in language that removed every excuse. An investigator asked whether I had ever given Kayla permission to use my identity for a loan. A bank attorney asked whether the wedding payments were gifts or loans. Paul's lawyer asked whether my anger toward him began before the alleged assault. Each question demanded one clear answer, while the truth of a family was made of years, habits, and mixed motives. I answered as carefully as I could. I admitted which payments had been voluntary. I admitted I had allowed Kayla to use the joint account in the past. I admitted I confronted her at the reception about Diane's photograph. None of those facts authorized the draw or justified the shove. Paul's attorney suggested I had provoked the fight by threatening to reveal the affair with Brianna. The video showed I had not mentioned it before Paul lunged for the folder, but Paul later admitted he assumed the evidence was inside and panicked. His panic did not excuse him. It did explain why a man who had spent years talking his way out of debt suddenly used his hands when he believed paper could no longer be controlled. Kayla's relationship with our extended family fractured unevenly. Her aunt stopped speaking to her after learning Diane's photograph had been removed. 2 cousins defended her, saying parents should never involve police in financial disputes with children. My older brother told me I should have canceled the wedding as soon as I found the messages, then criticized me for allowing the confrontation to happen at the reception, which was an impressive way of making every possible decision wrong after the fact. I stopped trying to win unanimous approval. Families often say they want peace when they mean they want the injured person to absorb enough discomfort that gatherings can continue. I was no longer willing to be the price of a pleasant holiday. That Christmas, Owen and Jenna came to my house. Kayla was invited to a separate breakfast the next morning because Owen was not ready to share a table with her. My brother called this cruel. Owen said forcing everyone into one room for a photograph would be the same mistake that created the wedding. We ate roast chicken because nobody wanted another formal event. Jenna was 7 months pregnant and uncomfortable. Owen burned the rolls. I placed Diane's photograph on the sideboard without asking whether the frame matched anything. Nothing dramatic happened, which felt like a luxury. Later that night, Owen told me he had worried becoming a young father meant he was destined to fail the way people said our family failed. I told him age created difficulties, but did not decide character. The pattern that mattered was not having children young. It was teaching those children that love meant hiding money, carrying secrets, and protecting adults from consequences. He asked whether I thought Kayla loved him. I said yes. He asked how someone could love him and use him at the same time. I told him people often protect the feeling they call love while damaging the person attached to it. Kayla loved being his mother, loved the identity, history, and place it gave her, but during the wedding, she valued control more than his actual wishes. Love did not become fake, but it became unsafe. Owen said that answer was worse than saying she never loved him. I agreed. People who heard pieces of the story often asked what the one mistake was. Some assumed Kayla's mistake was forging the loan badly, leaving the tablet signed in, removing Diane's photograph, or insulting me in front of witnesses. Those were mistakes, but none of them alone destroyed the plan. Her real mistake was believing the family relationships she controlled were stronger than the record she ignored. She thought Owen's love for his mother would make him reject evidence, thought my love for her would make me accept theft, thought guests would remember her calm voice more than bank statements, and thought a successful public image could turn anyone who challenged her into a pitiful old man making a scene. For years, that strategy worked, because I helped quietly, corrected problems privately, and allowed her to present the results as her own strength. The wedding was the first time she pushed the lie so far that protecting her required abandoning myself in front of the person I had helped raise. I am 50 now. Owen and Jenna visit most Sundays. Rose has started walking and treats the lower cabinets in my kitchen like a personal construction project. My company remains small, my truck is still old, and the gray suit hangs in the closet with Diane's note inside the pocket. I kept the suit even though Kayla once called it proof that I wanted pity. The truth is simpler. I wore what I had, paid what I promised, loved people longer than they deserved, and finally stopped confusing endurance with duty. The wedding did not end the way anyone wanted. My grandson lost his first dance, my daughter lost her marriage and career position, and I lost the version of our family where I could believe every emergency was accidental. Still, Owen kept his wife, his child, and the right to build a life without being used as leverage. Kayla told me to go home because she believed the room belonged to her. She forgot the truth had already arrived with me.